We're live.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is the first Node.js Diagnostic meeting of 2020. Today is January 15. And let's start with one of the most important questions, which we couldn't really close last year, and this is about the meeting time. Yuresh made a doodle, then the doodle expired. We couldn't really agree. Can we start with at least the people who are here today? Can they make the same time in the future? Is there anyone who thinks this time is not going to work for them?
It'll be a bit more difficult for me. I'm planning on moving to Asia soon.
Yeah, this is inconvenient for me as well. It's
earlier
11,
or later
12. Earlier would work.
Okay.
A couple of times we tried to set up the doodle. We couldn't come to a time slot that's acceptable for everybody. So one of the suggestions we had is to have 2 times for the meeting so that we can cover everybody without stretching too much. So I guess that is still a possibility. Let me set up a doodle in the coming.
Can we agree at least in one of the times now? Just I'm really afraid that if we are postponing again, doodle, blah, 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 we're not going to make any consensus soon. So for the people in Asia, how much earlier would work for you?
Yeah, anytime.
Really work well to just do like 12 hours later or something like that. Like at that point, it still works for most of like North America people to attend if they want to. It's just later in the evening, and it enables like anyone in Asia to attend. So it still
12 hours later.
It have like the maximum number of people I think would be able to attend all of the meetings.
Are you suggesting 1:30 and like currently it's 1:30 Eastern? Are you suggesting 1:30? So it's 1:30 p.m., 1:30 a.m.
Maybe like an hour or two before that. It kind of puts it in the realm of like, at least like West Coast North America can fairly easily attend that if they really wanted to.
Because yeah, I guess 12, even if like, because 12 p.m. seems to be probably the earliest for Pacific, right? Because that's 3 hours earlier is like 9. I guess I don't know how early people get up. Maybe 11 might work for people.
Okay, how about if for now we start to do these 2 time slots, but for now we keep the current time slot for 1, and then we will make a doodle about something 10 or 12 hours later.
So Dries, does it help? I mean, for the people who find the current one a challenge, does like an hour earlier help, or does that really make no difference?
In my particular case, like 1 hour earlier is not that different. Like I'll be like in Thailand area for the next year probably, and that right now would be like 2 a.m. or something, I think.
Yeah, I'm more like if we move to 2, will we still get more attendance if we move that 1 from 1:30 to 12 or something? Like, does that? I'm just trying to understand if moving that will actually help anybody, in addition to having the second time slot.
So from my perspective, if we are shifting ahead by 1 hour or 2 hours, I would be able to manage attending all the meetings I mean, I've been stretching like that. But if you're splitting into 2 meetings, I would prefer to have a more convenient time for me. That is like some 5 hours ahead of the current time.
Ahead being later or earlier, I can't.
Earlier.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, other people on the call, if we would move this meeting 1 hour earlier, is there anyone who is against it? I'm good. Okay, then how about if we move this one 1 hour earlier and we create a doodle for the secondary meeting?
Let me just look at the existing calendar. Just see, we move it 1 hour earlier.
We don't have like super large attendance at this particular meeting, so it would be good to get feedback from more people on that. But I think we can provide that as like a suggested time for the next meetup, the next meeting, and see what people think.
You mean like suggesting which one, the secondary time slot or moving earlier?
The moving earlier.
I guess it's like, if we thought moving it earlier makes it slightly better, I'm guessing like the people that the current time's okay for are probably already here, right? So if it doesn't hurt any of them to move it an hour earlier.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. To be honest, in the last 3 months, it was only those people who are in the call. So I don't expect we will screw up with anyone.
Yeah, I know we kind of aimed at this time slot at one point because there was some people that had a little bit of issues with earlier in the day, but that may have changed since then. Hard to know for sure.
So Jarish, is an hour earlier a little better for you or the same?
It's better for me.
Okay, so I'd say why don't we move it ahead an hour, unless it's a problem for it doesn't sound like it's a problem for anybody here. And then in the issue that we open to set the time for a second time slot, we can also discuss if there's like an even better time.
I like that idea.
Okay, if there's no objections, then I'll actually do that so I don't forget.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
Okay.
Second topic before we go into the actual topics is actually the attendance number. It's like today is slightly better than usually, but this working group has a very low attendance number. Any ideas what we could do about it?
I think we did get a bit more interest at the Collaborator Summit. So like Giovanni, I think, was indicated he was going to get more active, and there was at least 1 or 2 other people. So maybe we can see what's like, other than like broadcasting or trying to promote that we want more people. I'm not sure what else. I guess the other thing is there's some discussion about Collaborator Summits. Sorry. And that people seem to be interested in. So I know, like, Peter, if you were talking about organizing a Collaborator Summit, that might be a way to also see if we can get more people participating in lead up to that.
So Mateusz, I know you're in a conversation with Alex. Is there anything you can share about details or not really yet?
Not yet.
Okay, then I think the TLDR is like as Netflix, we reached out to facility. We are trying to organize something, and then we will see how many people are interested.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess definitely there was a lot of interest in the Collab Summit. The room was full, and when we went through each of the items, there was at least a couple of stakeholders who are interested in each of the initiatives, and they wanted to attend. Again, there was a discussion about the time-related inconvenience, etc. But I'm sure the summit kind of a focused effort and some talks around that is definitely going to bring a lot of folks.
Any chance, Girish, that you have a list or contact to those people? We could invite them, like maybe personally to this meeting, or like asking them what help do they need to pick up the work.
I will check. Yeah, I may have name of a few folks at least. Yeah.
And we have the recording, so we might be able to look at the recording to remind ourselves too.
Okay.
On the Collaborator Summit session, folks were looking to collaborate with the working group, or were they looking for suggestions on how to use diagnostic tools to understand problems on their applications? Or was it a mix of both?
I think it's a mix of both, but more towards needing to collaborate. Basically, people who wants to see certain capabilities to be implemented. The best example was async hook, I guess. There were quite many interest on that, and they want to see it being out of experimental and having the right performance and things like that. I believe that is a visible category which we could see. But again, there were people, real consumers who want to see certain capabilities implemented as well.
Okay, then please, Girish, collect those people, and then we can try to invite them.
Sure.
Okay. So if these two comes together, we will have a better meeting time and hopefully more people. Is there anything which is more scheduling and organizing related, or should we move to more technical conversations or more like the open issues?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else on that one. Let's see if we get a few more of those people, and if we can find out who they are and invite them. That sounds like some good concrete actions.
Okay. So we always discuss these two as two separate, but we always discuss as one, but it's always two separate here. So I feel in December, we kind of laid out a plan how to move forward, and we assigned people to definite action items. If I change my browser tab, do you see the meetings from December notes?
Yep. I think I see you moving stuff around. So yeah.
I am guilty because I didn't do anything that I promised. But,
I was kind of thinking I was going to be the same, but it's a new year, right? So.
Yeah, but as I remember, we kind of discussed, like, let's take a quick look what we discussed.
Yeah, I said I'd do Valgrind, and I still have to do that. So.
The next item, we assign people to write docs for user journey in the Node.js repo. Michael will work on the Valgrind, Matthias Peter will work on the LL node, and Girish will work on the node report. So that's about the documentation. And I also own that we were working on a process crash use case, and I need to move it to the GitHub repository. So we have the content for that, just need to move. And the people who signed for a specific kind of best practices guideline, they need to work on that. So I guess, so this is, I think, if it still sounds good, then I wouldn't talk about this anymore. What we could do is like, we could move to the next user journey and make a deep dive about that. I think that could be.
Yeah, I think that's worthwhile. That's useful. So like in our next, because we're kind of alternating meetings to do that, right?
Yeah. Do we want to pick the topic now? So everyone can think about, get excited until next time?
Sounds good.
Okay. So last time we looked how did we call it? We called it the process crash. So I guess we could focus to maybe some poor performance or memory inefficiency or async operations inefficiency lags.
I think my process runs out of memory is a pretty
Okay.
I think we did
common one.
this one last time.
Process
I
runs out of
remember
memory.
we
Covered that one?
discussing about memory at least.
Oh yeah, we discussed when the process crashes because it runs out of the memory, and we discussed both the native use case and the
okay.
JavaScript. So what is missing now is when it's a slow memory leak and the process doesn't really crash.
Right.
Okay. We can, yeah. Does it sound reasonable, Matthäus, if we discuss that
Yep.
use case? Okay. Then if there is no objection, then I would recommend to make a deep dive on that. Do we want to do what we did last time, that like we use the usual time slot, but instead of going through the action items, we do a deep dive on the whole meeting?
I think that works for me, although I guess the next regular, like you're the next time, the same time slot, but not a month from now, right? Or how often do we have them? Every 2 weeks or every?
We have every 2 weeks. So that would
Right,
mean
okay.
in two weeks, we would discuss this use case instead of going through the action items.
I think that's been working okay. Like if we end up not getting through all of our agendas, whatever, we might switch that. But for now, it still seems like a good idea to me.
Okay, I just copied okay. We don't have any action, any item on the agenda. Do we want to talk about other things?
Well, there's the async hook stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've basically taken over that.
Oh, you are taking over, nice.
Yeah, he volunteered to be our champion at the Collaborator Summit for that.
Yeah. And I've been working on a few things. The main immediate thing is Matteo Colina had the like current resource API that he was working on that sat for a while. So I've been working on updating that and trying to get that actually landed now. So it's changed a bit, and some like other stuff has kind of fallen out of that for more stuff I want to work on.
Mm-hmm.
But
I guess the last issue was around performance with the PR, or is that it?
Yeah, yeah, it has some performance issues that I've been working on merging. Like I created a separate API for like pushing and popping the current resource from the resource stack, and we already have a thing for pushing and popping the IDs. And so that being two separate calls, which were basically all in the same spot, was not that efficient.
Okay.
But the way that the ID stuff works currently is that like it only does the like push call in certain cases. In a lot of cases, it can actually just like interact with this like shared typed array buffer directly. And So I need to basically mirror that same sort of thing with the resources as well, exposing the basically just a regular array because it's any arbitrary resource object. Need to expose that so it's available on both sides and then interact with that. So far, haven't quite got it working, but working on that.
Is there any way to like have a single push do both? Push the ID and the object, or?
Yeah. So I have that part is already written, but the push doesn't always actually happen.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
Because like it'll occasionally just skip that altogether and just interact with the object directly. So I need to copy that same logic for resources if I want to use the same function to push both things at the same time.
Okay, but it'll effectively, it's because there was some discussion about like, can we unify? It sounds like you have unified it, but that means you have to do some more work somewhere else. Is the
Yeah.
Okay, understood. Thanks.
And in looking through all this, like I've over the last like 2 weeks kind of dug like all through the async hooks API and like all the internals of it, and kind of come to the conclusion that there's actually not really any reason why it needs to exist, primarily on the native side. So been kind of experimenting with the idea of actually moving like most of async hooks into JavaScript.
Okay, and that would, in theory, have a performance boost, at least in some cases, and hopefully the most common cases.
Yeah. So currently, like, the vast majority of triggers of the async hooks events all actually are effectively initiated from the JavaScript side and then go into native to like do whatever activity and then come back to JavaScript to do the trigger and then go back to native again and then come back to JavaScript to actually do whatever the task was. But if we just like moved the wrapping from triggering inside of C++ to triggering when it enters C++, then we could actually skip like several boundary crosses. It would in theory actually be a lot faster.
And I'm also, it's making me wonder, does that make, the discussion we had before around the, like a more generic concept of async context and possibly bringing that to be like a JavaScript level standard instead of, node specific. Does having moved the logic to the JS side help in any way, or is it just totally tangential to that?
So it's related. So there's currently 3 different async context type APIs open, all of them with their own different ideas about how it should work. And then we have another discussion inside of the diagnostics repo.
That's a different one, which I was going to get to next. I meant like Mike, the other Mike had a proposal for just the notion of async context, not the CLS type API, but the, what it means and what a runtime like V8 might implement to support that.
Yeah. So the current PRs are more just like a specific implementation of it. There's not so much in trying to nail down the more abstract design and specifically not really looking too much at what that like linking between barriers is.
Right.
That other like, proposal had the like two different like 2 different paths for like what triggered a thing and what like ultimately caused a thing, and that's not really so much a consideration here. It's like all these are more just only trying to get as much as propagating the like
right
an object through the continuation.
Yeah, I wasn't actually thinking that those other PRs were necessarily tied to Mike's proposal at all. I was more like, with the work you're doing to move async hooks to JavaScript, does that help us at all in terms of getting toward making progress towards that proposal / concept? And I wasn't even actually thinking the other ones might be related as well. I'll have to go back and think some more about how that relates. But
So pushing like the general concept, possibly. Like one of the particular reasons why I want to move a bunch of async hooks to the JavaScript side is because currently, like one of the biggest things that has prevented async hooks from like people being able to consider it as stable is that it exposes internals through
right.
the resource objects.
Yep.
It's using the internal handles, not the like actual external user facing like socket object or something like that. And like we don't want to make any promises about what the API is on that object or anything like that. So if we move this to the JavaScript level, we could actually propagate like the actual external user facing objects instead of the handles.
Right. Okay.
It's a lot easier to get at the levels that we need to get at to do that there.
Okay. Well, I'll keep my question to once you have something, you make more progress, maybe think about it again. I liked the idea of that if we could end up with something that was a broad, like JavaScript applicable, and got it into the standard, that would be like a win for us and for other users as well.
That probably wouldn't be a TC39 standard though, right?
The thought was that, you know, the concept of the async context and how you would preserve like the flow across those contexts would potentially make sense in TC39.
Okay, because I'm not sure. I know it will work for promises because promises is specified in JavaScript, but for callback-based APIs and event-based APIs, I'm not sure if it would be possible to include in the specification because it's not something that is provided by JavaScript. It's something that browsers implement and Node implement.
Right, but the thought was that it could be something that is part of the JavaScript spec and provided by those same things. Like not you know async, not the async hooks API for sure, but the general concept that, you know, you're making these asynchronous calls, and that, you know, the spec could say when you make one of these calls, you need to retain, you know, a virtual frame, or like it wouldn't have the implementation, but it would say you need to be able to preserve this information and provide some API where you could get that information from.
And no matter what level we tried to put an API like this at, we're always going to have to deal with the like user lands queuing. Like if
Yes.
someone makes their own like connection pool or something like that, like you can do that at the JavaScript level, like not like at like the VM level. So like the VM has no awareness necessarily that this function is going to run at some later point triggered by something completely unrelated. So like no matter what level we do this at, we will have to have an API of some sort that a user would use to say like bind this to the context.
Right, and ideally that wouldn't be node specific or browser specific or whatever. It could be part of the standard.
Yeah. Like it in theory, it's possible that like we could ask the spec to have like extra information around like when a function is declared versus when it's actually passed into something. And you could like bind to the declaring context. but that that's not necessarily even always the right place. But it's a difficult problem.
Yeah, it's not an easy problem, but I was just exploring if it's less native code, does it actually move us towards something that might help us understand what that would look like or not? Probably a little early to ask the question.
Yeah, personally, yes, I think, at least just from the angle that it lets us expose it more at the level that like we can actually stabilize this reasonably, and also like it being JavaScript and like at that level to interact with the handles we want to, it makes it easier to iterate on it, I think.
I mean, this is super interesting, to be honest, to move to the level, but currently I am just really happy that Steven picked it up and making progress on it.
Yeah, agreed.
So about that, like, do you need help from the working group somewhere where we can help you, or you handle it, or how do you plan this work, or you handle it and just share your learnings and ask for some feedback, or like, yeah, what's your expectation?
So my immediate need right now, I guess, is just around getting the execution async resource PR landed, which currently is basically just on me to figure out how to like how to mirror the like ID APIs and like buffer interactions for resources. I've tried to copy it like fairly exactly, but it's not quite working, and I haven't figured out why. So I might just push my changes up to the pull requests later today, and people can look at it. And if anyone has ideas around like something I missed or something, I'd appreciate people looking at it. After that, the like possibly converting everything over to JavaScript. I don't have a specific plan for that yet. So maybe like give me until like the next meeting or like the one after that, and I might have a more clear idea of exactly what to do.
Okay. I mean, I'm really just asking, like, if there anything what makes you move faster. It's not like I'm expecting that you report us or lay out the plan. It was more like, if you know that you will need something at some point and to move faster, then yeah, I'm just asking because maybe there is someone who can help with that here.
At some points, like when I do the like native to JavaScript conversion of the API, that will be fairly big and complicated. So like definitely having like as many reviewers as I can would help. If anyone has like much familiarity with the internals, I think it'd be helpful to have some people that can jump in and convert certain spots, and the particular like thing I'm most concerned about right now for that conversion is so currently there's mostly the like internal callback scope class in the C++ side that basically just provides like a scope within a native function that like triggers the triggers the init and or like triggers the before hook when it's created and the after hook when it's destroyed, to link to like an existing init. And I basically want to take that concept and move that into JavaScript through just having a function that basically right now we have like all our like higher level APIs have like a handle or request object beneath it that we will attach like an onComplete function or something like that to it. So I want to just wrap those functions, just like pass that function into another function that triggers the before and after automatically, like on the JavaScript side. I just want to make sure that that is reasonable everywhere that we do that. But I haven't gone to like do a full review of the JavaScript side of the code base to make sure that actually works yet.
Okay, so maybe one thing that we can just do in a very natural, if you have pull requests, then tag them with a diagnostic label, and we are just, if people are here, we are just ask them personally or promote them for more reviews. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing what you can do. Yeah, obviously I can't really promise that like people will really look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So I think if we're finished on that topic, Giovanni, you'd volunteered to pick up one of our other areas that we were wanting to make progress but didn't have a champion. But to be honest, it's just not coming back to me right now. Can you remind us which one that was?
I think you were at some point you were talking about something related to profiling, or you have something for that, and we probably, I mean, I can probably help with the user cases too.
Jerish, do you have the deck that you had put up? Because I think it was one of those categories, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, if Jerish, you can just find that and share it. Maybe we can go back and find which one it was.
So we have async hooks, V8 tracing, profiler, then the CPU profiler, memory debugging with heap dump, memory debugging with LL node, postmortem debugging, diagnostic report, and best practices.
So what was the one right after async hooks?
It was V8 tracing.
I think that might have been the one. Does that ring a bell, Giovanni? Or
yeah, I can't recall what this at this moment. I remember there was something to profile. It's probably CPU or heap profiling, because that's
right. Okay, so you're right. There was some things that you said the node source had.
Yeah, we actually have a lot of stuff related to profiling.
A couple of outstanding issues or open issues with the tracing is one is the categories of tracing is not well aligned with the field or the requirements. Second one is like it's currently not supporting the worker threads, and we seems to be having some attempts to collect the tracing low-level information from the libuv, but it wasn't successful. And then the documentation. These are the main pain points which we talked about from the tracing perspective.
I think another pain point related to tracing is lack of documentation.
Yeah,
for example,
that's right.
if I want to use the trace events API, I have no idea what categories are available or what they do. I have tried in the past to use some, and usually I have either to look very deep into the documentation, the examples, or look into Node.js code, which is not something that we want our users to do.
No.
So documenting the categories, what they are used for, possible performance implications of activating them is probably a good start for trace events.
Right. So what I was trying to get back to sort of loop back to was, you know, Giovanni had shown interest in leading a particular area and figuring out how we help them get started on that. Maybe we can go back and look at the recording. That might refresh our memory too.
Sorry, I was doing something else. Are you asking me something?
No, I was just saying, like, basically, you know, you'd shown interest in leading one of the areas,
Yeah.
and I was just trying to figure out, okay, how do we help you get started on that?
Okay. Yeah, I
And
mean, whatever, if you have records or docs or meeting notes, I can just go through all of them.
There is a recording of the video, so we can probably just pull that out and take a look. That'll refresh our memory, and then hopefully next meeting we can get you kicked off, if not before.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't have any problem.
Okay.
The other thing that I think worthwhile talking about this week is the CLS PR from Vladimir that's in Node Core. I'll paste the issue in here just a second. It's this one. So I just paste that in the chat.
Okay.
You know, there's three key questions which I kind of outlined in there. One is like, there's the concept of like, should this be in core or not? There's one objection to that. A number of people who've chimed in saying they think it should be. You know, that came out of the diagnostic working group session in the fall. So it would be great if people from this team would chime in on that as well, supporting whichever they think is the right answer. The second question is around, there's like competing PRs. So again, that could use some additional input and review. You know, the fundamental differences is one is naming, which, you know, I think that's kind of a bike shedding thing. Async local versus async context. Async local is, I think, to be along the similar lines of thread local. And it kind of has a similar idea of you just declare one for each thing you want to be available across the local context versus, say, a local thread. Context, I think, has more of the notion of you're running in something and you have a run that you start, you know, you say, okay, I'm going to run this, and then everything that is run as a result of that's in the context. And you get a map where you can put things in and out of that context versus them being separate things. So that's kind of the second one is like, okay, if we assume that we do want to have it in core, it's like, how do we get to an API that we agree? Because there's kind of a couple competing ones. And then the third one was the PR that Stephen's working on. Should that be a blocker for landing the API at all? You know, is it that we really need to finish that first, and then we can layer this, you know, whatever the right is API on top of it? Or is it possible to land an API which uses the existing functionality and have, you know, basically, you know, Stephen's PR change or be put in, and then the API be hopefully no external API changes, but the internals changed over to use that. So it's like, should it be a blocker is the third one. So that's those three things, I think it would be good to get, you know, our the diagnostic team actively involved in the discussion and helping to get to a conclusion.
Personally, I don't think any of the existing async context PRs should need to be blocked on the PR I'm working on. What I'm working on is really only like a performance improvement to them, or like maybe a bit of stability improvement. Like,
Yep.
There's like theoretical memory leak situations with those without the PR I'm working on. But personally, I think that like if we're landing it as experimental, like as long as these memory leak situations are not possible when you're not using the API, then I think it should be fine to land it as experimental.
So I think you adding that comment as the PR owner would carry, you know, a fair amount of weight in terms of saying, hey, no, we don't need to wait.
I believe I did make
or maybe you already did. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think we should need to wait for it to land. I would maybe think that we should wait for it to mark it as stable, though.
Yeah. I mean, that would make total sense to me. I don't think there's going to be any rush to make it stable. Like we want to test it out, and so that's the same thing. Yeah, I'm thinking along the same lines. Like I don't think it should be a blocker for experimental. Exiting certainly would be. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have a feeling that the possible conversion of like the whole async hooks concept to JavaScript would actually end up just turning into like its own async storage of sorts, and like we might actually just throw all of this away. So it's hard to know.
Okay, so it would look like, but you're saying it would end up being a different API, you think?
Yeah, well, like my immediate intuition is to just try and like mostly mirror async hooks as it is just in JavaScript, but there's a bunch of extra stuff that we might not necessarily even need. So it's hard to say.
Okay.
But my feeling is that at the least it's likely that the async context would become more deeply integrated with the code if it moves to JavaScript side.
Right, that could make sense. The goal with this is to have an API that, regardless of what our ultimate implementation is potentially more stable, right? Like not necessarily immediately, but it exposes less than we do through async hooks, so it might be easier to make it as yeah, we're comfortable, we can continue to support this, even if things change very radically underneath.
Yeah.
Any from this group, is there anybody who thinks, you know, that functionality shouldn't be in core? Just
Haven't seen the pull request. I don't have an opinion.
okay, so yeah, if you it's probably worth taking a look if you have time to have an opinion and then chiming in there. But
okay. We have 4 minutes left. Is there anything what you want to discuss? I take it as a no.
Yeah, I've just posted the links to the couple async context PRs in the chat if anyone wants to look at them.
Thank you. I added them to the docs.
Yeah, the first one is the specific one we were just talking about, and the other two are like thread local like APIs.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thanks, Stephen, for picking up the work.
Yeah.
And then see you guys in 2 weeks. And then in 2 weeks, we will discuss the deep dive on basically memory leaks.
Right. That's 2 weeks from now, right? We'll do that.
Yes, and Michael will move this meeting to 1 hour earlier.
Yep, I already did that in the calendar. So.
Okay, thank you very
Good.
much. See you in 2 weeks. Bye.
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 Bye.